Amazing. So before we jump in to talk about storytelling, I want to ground us on some community agreements like we always do. I don't think we have anyone new. If you're new here, welcome. Let us know in the chat if this is your first time joining us. So I will go through the agreements. It's just going to be a little bit brief today. So if we can just go to the slides, thank you so much. Want to remind you all that we want to be in community that is active and respectful for folks for sharing. So we want to engage in active and respectful listening, especially today. We're going to be talking about sharing our stories. So that is such an important part of being in community and learning this skill together. We're always invited to choose curiosity and turn to wonder when we disagree, or when we have questions, and when something that we hear, just like turn to wonder, ask questions, and choose curiosity. The third agreement is that we are all experts of our own experience. Also super relevant today. This is pretty much like you are the expert of yourself, right? So own that and allow others to do the same, extend that same grace and that gift to other folks. Next slide, please. Practice mutual respect. And L is for liberatory language, as I've mentioned a couple of times during our conversations. We're very intentional about the language that we use. So if you have questions about anything that we say, we please ask you to schedule some time with me and we can discuss it. I can just provide you with some context and hear your questions and concerns. But I ask that you do that with me. And lastly, also super relevant for today as well, share the miracle, but not the saint. So we want this to be a space where folks can share who they are and what they've been with their journeys, right? And want to make sure that we uphold their privacy, and just if the story impacted us, you can share the miracle, but be aware of keeping the saints. Keep the saint. Be mindful of sharing, right? With others. And those are our 6 agreements for today. As your facilitator, I will ground us again in them if we need to. But it's been a really amazing space that we have created in here over the last 4 weeks. 4 sessions, 8 weeks. So thank you, folks, for being grounded and allowing these agreements to center and ground us as a community. With that, if we're good with these agreements, can I see some thumbs up from folks? It's always great to get some enthusiasm. Amazing. Thank you so much. With that, I am just so delighted, excited to introduce my colleague, Kate, who is going to be opening our space in prayer. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Steph. It's so wonderful to be here with you all today. To center us, I'm going to read a prayer from our newest publication. It's the You Are Not Alone brochure, which you can see here. And this is a prayer for the journey toward reproductive justice, which is by Reverend Dr. Elizabeth Caton, who is an Episcopal priest and one of our friends who works with the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice. So if I could just invite us all to take a big, deep breath in and let it out. Holy, gracious, and loving God, you are wise beyond our knowing. You've gifted us with intelligence, with memory, reason, and skill. You fill our lives with experiences in which we may freely use these gifts. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. Before we were born, you knew us. You knew our deepest thoughts, our fiercest passions, our desperate longings, our ancient hurts, our wildest dreams, and our strongest fears. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. When we were being shaped and formed in the secrets of our mother's womb, You also knit together us in strong threads of liberation, of justice, of will and grace, and set us free to live our lives as human beings fully alive. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. Inspire our minds, fire our spirits, and strengthen our wills that justice and compassion may always be our companions on this journey. And may we know your peace. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. Amen. Thank you all.
Amen. Thank you, Kate, for that prayer. Folks are asking in the chat how they can get the resource, so I will let folks share that with folks that are interested. We're so excited about this for sure, and it's just beautiful. So I'm excited for you all to take a look. And thank you again, Kate. So we are going to go ahead and jump into our session today. As excited as I was to introduce you all to Kate, I'm also very excited to introduce Ashley Wilson, who is our communication director. And I cannot think of just like another person that can best share all this amazing information with you all about the importance of storytelling, and just like we're in really amazing hands. So thank you, Ashley, for being with us and for all that you do, and for just guiding us through sharing our stories.
Thanks, Steph. I'm so glad to be here with you all tonight. As Steph mentioned, my name is Ashley Wilson. My pronouns are she, her. I have been on staff as the Director of Communications and Strategy at Catholics for Choice for just over a year. But I have spent my whole 10 years of professional experience in faith-based advocacy in Washington, D.C. More recently, before I joined Catholics for Choice, I worked for the Quakers at the Friends Committee on National Legislation. And before that, I actually spent about 7 or 8 years working with Network Lobby for Catholic Social Justice and Nuns on the Bus. So having people of faith talk about why their faith matters in a political context is my favorite thing to do. So I'm very excited to be here with you all tonight. Tonight we're talking about storytelling. As a communications professional, I love this because I think stories are the building blocks for so many of the ways that we interact in the world and as advocates. Hopefully, I don't have to convince you that sharing your story is important, but I would like to invite you now to put a few thoughts in the chat about why it is important to share your story. So feel free to just pop some thoughts in the chat. Why is it important to share your story? And I'll read them out for the purposes of the recording. Anything? Okay, our stories have the power to change hearts and minds. It is healing to tell and hear. That's a really good one. It's important so others can relate. It's a great tool for empathy. These are all great reasons. I'm glad I don't have to convince you that sharing our stories are important. I also, I am a fan of Pope Francis often, and one of the things that he calls us to do is encounter. And I think that stories are a really powerful way that we can answer that call to encounter, which Catholics for Choice holds so dear to our mission. So storytelling is really important. I'm glad we are all on the same page about that. Oh, I love seeing that someone else has Quaker ties. So what a small world. Okay, so here's the thing. When we hear about abortion storytelling, I think that folks have a tendency, I know I certainly have a tendency to think, oh, I haven't had an abortion, so maybe I don't have a story, and therefore it must just be up to someone else to share their stories. But there are lots of different ways that you can share your story for why you support abortion access. It doesn't just have to be a personal, here is how it directly affected me. And to be clear, we do want our stories to be personal. We don't want to be sharing someone else's story. That's not as powerful or relational in the sense of like when we're trying to have conversations with people. So I think of 3 different types of stories when I think through like, how do we tell our story? The first type is a turning point story. The second type is a personal impact story. And the third type is a values-based story. These aren't all mutually exclusive. You know, there are certainly levels of overlapping, but really when we think of what a story is, it is 3 to 4 sentences that really get at the crux of why we do this work. So I am going to now go through with the help of Aisha, who is on the slides, and give some examples or give an example of each of these types of stories. So the first type is a turning point story. These are really popular and really common in faith-based abortion storytelling. They look something like, when I was younger, I used to oppose abortion access, or maybe abortion wasn't an issue I cared about. But then something happened. I had a baby. Someone close to me needed abortion care. I learned more about Catholics for Choice and the pro-choice faithful perspective. And now I see that abortion access is a core part of Catholic social justice and the right to health care. Will you join me in supporting Catholics for Choice? See, they can be really short and succinct, but they really get a message across of, I used to think this, and now I think this. Won't you join me? And it has that invitation in. The second type of story is, I think, one that I mentioned earlier that we all really think about a lot. It's the personal impact story. But the personal impact story doesn't just have to be about your own personal experience with abortion. For example, for the past 5 years, I volunteered as an abortion doula in my local clinic. There, I've seen firsthand how many people come into the clinic who want to pray with me, who need medical care, who share with me about their lives and faith and what brought them into this clinic. Meeting these people and accompanying them, I knew I had to be more outspoken in support of people's right to choose abortion if that is what's best for their own personal situation. Will you support the Women's Health Protection Act? So this is an example of clearly this person has been affected by all these people that they are in community with. And rather than just saying, let me tell you the details of this other person that I met, they focus instead on what is it about their work or the people in their community that has impacted them and motivates them to support abortion access and do this work. So that's the second type, personal impact story. The third type is a values-based story. Now, again, as someone who has worked in faith-based advocacy my whole career, this is maybe my favorite. And it's the one that I think is like, really, you know, you could have no people in your life. You could be like alone, living on Walden Pond, right? Like living alone and still have a values-based story. This is the one that really derives from whether you're a Catholic or have other personal values. It sounds like, as a Catholic, I believe in social justice, personal conscience, and religious freedom. I know when it comes to moral decision-making, an individual's conscience is the final arbiter of what is right and wrong for their own personal situation. As someone who believes in religious freedom, I also know that the beliefs of some religious folks should not override the beliefs of others. Different religions believe different things about abortion. How does your faith lead you on this issue? So those are sort of some 3 different types of examples. How do we feel about those? Do they feel familiar? Do we see themes? Do they feel like, hey, maybe I have a story that might fit into one of these categories. I can see myself as an abortion storyteller, regardless of whether or not I've had an abortion. I see some head nods. Great. So all of these stories have a few core components, perfect, Aisha put them up on the slide. They have what I would call 4 different components. One is that they're personal. The second is that they focus on the heart, not the head. Sure, there might be a scenario where you can add in a fact, like 1 in 4 Catholics, 1 in 4 abortion patients in this country identifies as Catholic. That might fit into your own personal story, but it doesn't have to be. You don't have to be an encyclopedia of knowledge. It includes a moral or a value. And every single one of these stories makes some sort of ask. And that ask doesn't have to be, I'm going to my member of Congress and I want them to do this. That ask could just be a curiosity question. My old boss, Sister Simone Campbell, used to talk about holy curiosity as a way to understand other people's perspectives and how that's a really powerful tool in storytelling. So those are the 4 components of storytelling in the different types. But again, I won't be quizzing you on what type of story do I have. I simply am just offering these up as examples. So moving forward, as you craft your own story about why you identify as a Catholic for choice, or a pro-choice person of faith, or a former Catholic, or even just a person who believes in the common good, I invite you to think about these elements. How is your story values-based? How might your story have a personal impact? How might your story express a turning point? And then the pieces of how to make it personal, how to focus on the heart, to include the value, and make an ask. And I do think that stories are really the building blocks, and we'll go into this a little bit later. Once you have that sort of core story down, there are many different places that you can share these stories. So again, I invite you to put in the chat, like, how might you share this story with people? Like, what are some of the ways you can share your story? And I'll read a few out if folks have ideas. So I'll say one of the ways that I really share my story is in conversation with my family at the Thanksgiving dinner table who do not agree with me on this issue. I'm not necessarily trying to change their mind. I think that they know they won't change my mind, and I don't think I'll change theirs anytime soon, but I definitely use storytelling as a way to create empathy. Lobbying when recruiting others to the cause. I love that. Having one-on-ones with activists. In a post on Facebook from our social media master, John Becker, writing a letter to the editor for Catholics for Choices magazine. All of these are really great examples. And they're all the same story, right? It's just, we might use them, once we have that building block, we might use them in different ways. A few final, so to speak, reminders about storytelling is, as Steph has said multiple times, and I think has been a theme of this Advocates Bible study, you are the expert in your own story. People can always debate facts. They can even debate Bible passages. I know we have definitely seen people on our social media talk about, is abortion in the Bible? Isn't it in the Bible? The Bible says this. Not like, there's lots of places where people like to debate about the Bible or a statistic or what is or isn't true. But what people really can't debate is your own personal experience and your own personal story. Nobody can say, no, you didn't feel that. Or even if they did, then it's like way out there, right? It's not a transformative moment of storytelling and sharing. And stories are tools. I really, really think about this a lot, that stories are tools to help people encounter. We're not storytellers who exist solely to be in the business of changing people's minds. I appreciate the person who said earlier that, like, stories are a very key way that we do help people change their minds, and that's an important point. But we don't enter into sharing our story to just be like, I'm going to tell you my story and it's going to change your mind entirely. We do it more for encounter and relationship building and doing the long work, right? Of like, at Catholics for Choice, we like to talk about emboldening the silent majority of pro-choice Catholics, knowing that the majority of Catholics actually agree with us. It's just that they're quiet about it, right? They don't feel the ability to be outspoken, which is why sharing our stories can be helpful in helping people find their own voice and share their own perspectives with the help and the comfort and the solidarity of other people in their community. So now we're going to go into, does this all sound good? I want to take a moment, right? Are there any questions? If folks have questions, I'm happy to have them drop them in the chat. But it seems like we're pretty good. I hope this is helpful. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go into small groups and we're going to practice how sharing our stories can help us have some difficult conversations with people about abortion. Difficult in this case does not mean disagreeable. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. It's actually just an acknowledgement that like storytelling and sharing our own personal stories is hard. It's hard work. So the Advocates Bible has really helpful speech bubbles on, I think, page 126 to 131 that offer sound bites about what we might be able to say in conversation with people. But remember, it's mostly about how to meet folks with empathy and share our own stories to respond to their concerns. So we're going to go through two scenarios that I'm just going to talk you through first. Then we're going to send folks off into breakout groups of 2 or 3 people for about 10 minutes. What we're going to ask you to do is a role play. If role play isn't your thing, you can just practice sharing your story. That's okay. But I really invite you, we try to make these scenarios very realistic. Based on conversations that like I have definitely had with people in my life, and I think a lot of folks will resonate with. So scenario, and then I would also say just consider these like these prompts to be more choose your own adventure. There's no right or wrong answer. You're not trying to get someone to a logical conclusion. It's just how are you as the support person offering your story as a way to create empathy and solidarity. So scenario number 1 is Joan goes to her close friend Lori and shares that many years ago, Joan had an abortion. Joan is considering sharing her story with an organization she recently learned about called Catholics for Choice. Joan believes she made the right decision, and she knows it's important to talk about now that Roe v. Wade is overturned, but she's worried about what it might mean for her as a member of their church, and that she feels like she might be alone in being outspoken. So if you're drawn to this scenario, practice the conversation between Joan and Lori, focusing on how you might share your story as a way to create solidarity and empathy. Does that sound good? And then the second scenario is a different one. You can pick whichever one you want, or again, third option is just practice sharing your own story. Second scenario is 28-year-old Ari tells their friend Emma that they're in the early stages of pregnancy and is considering whether to have an abortion. They're in a stable relationship, they are gainfully employed, but they just don't know if they're ready to be a parent. Ari shares that they feel dumb for getting pregnant in the first place. So practice this conversation between Ari and Emma to help Ari through their decision-making process. You're providing an affirming and supportive environment for the conversation to take place. You're not trying to convince Ari of one way or the other. So these are the two scenarios. Maybe we might even be able to drop them in the chat. I know they're a little bit long. But again, the idea here is to go in, don't focus on what Joan or Ari should do. You're not trying to lead a horse to water. There is no right answer. just focus on how you as a friend would support them no matter what they decide, and how you sharing your values and your story can provide comfort to them. So anyone have anything they want to share? So what do folks think? Anyone want to share what the experience was like? It was good to hear people's unique stories. I love storytelling. I'm going to say that like 10 more times tonight, at least. Any other thoughts? Oh, come on. You guys, you all don't want me to just be the only one talking. Oh, I see a hand. Linda. Can you
unmute?
Perfect.
You know, it's hysterical. The whole notion that I'm muted and I forget to unmute myself. I think that, and again, I came in a little late, but what I thought was really interesting was that all three of us were thinking about ways to help women deal with what they've experienced, and not to feel shame, not to feel a sense of rejection and alienation. That one of the things that we have to do as women, the sisterhood, is find ways to articulate our own experiences, but then to share the idea that we have overcome a lot, and that we have to be able to make the argument. We have to be able to ourselves and to others, to move in the direction of affirming this in our culture and in our greater society. We have to change the power structure. We have to move past this constant control and beating down of women. We need to affirm that and claim it and take it and move with it. So I got that energy just from listening to the ladies that I was with.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing, Linda. Yeah, I was that I resonate with that. I was at a wedding, a family wedding this weekend, and one of my like second cousin's wife, who I know and we're friendly, we see each other at Christmas. We were chatting and she turned to me and she goes, "I think I saw you on TikTok." And I was like, "You did?" And her response was, "Yeah. Are you working for Catholics for Choice? Like, I didn't even know that that's the work you were doing. I didn't know Catholics for Choice existed, but it's so important. And thank you. I had no idea." And we had this really lovely conversation about how, you know, it sounds cheesy to say now more than ever, but really, truly, like after the overturning of Roe versus Wade, storytelling became so much more important. And I love the comment earlier that was in the chat about small groups creating safety, that like the way we practice this storytelling is in these smaller groups with trusted friends, so that hopefully we can build up to larger conversations and maybe sharing more publicly with folks. I see Barbara with their hand up.
Yes, hi everybody. I think one of the first things I said was that every abortion is the result of an unwanted pregnancy, and every unwanted pregnancy is the result of sexism in one way or another. I think my story that seems to have been helpful to other people is that I did have an abortion. Several years later, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years later, I was pregnant. I was married and I was pregnant, and I was out at night taking a walk, and I suddenly remembered everybody is going to think that this is my first child, but it's not. And I had a conversation with the little big soul of the baby, fetus, whatever being it was that I had aborted. And it was very peaceful. I said, you know, I'm very honored that you were with me. even for 6 weeks or so. And you must have known that it was going to be a short trip. You must have chosen to be with me for that period of time. And I would like to adopt you, and you can look over us, because, you know, you're going to have, I knew it was going to be a boy, you're going to have a brother, maybe a sister at some point. But there was something about making peace and having that direct conversation with the baby that I had aborted that actually gave me a lot of relief from any guilt that I would have had. And that is something, that's my story.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Barbara. Wow. And there's lots of gratitude in the chat that we're all really honored. I might share that with my mom if I'm being not, again, sharing the miracle, not the saint, but the conversation. Because I think that she would find that that idea, that practice, transformative.
It is for many people.
Does anyone have anything else that they want to share? Great. I'm happy to keep talking with you, at you. But I'll just give folks one more minute if anyone has anything. Also, Catholics for Choice staff are in the room, so if anyone has anything they want to share, feel free. Or did I see Joanne come off mute?
Yeah. I think when people tell their own unique personal story, it's an opportunity to show their humanity. And it's in that ability to be personal and human about it that people have new awarenesses about what it means to make these kind of decisions, that caring, good females make these decisions in very complex situations because they care deeply about humanity in all its complexity.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to name, because I see a little bit of this chatter in the chat as well, like part of the reason why these scenarios were written, and I think that part of what I see as my work in talking to folks about pro-choice, faithful Catholic abortion stories is making people aware or like helping create that call to encounter of when we talk about folks who need abortions, we're not necessarily just talking about people who look like me, a mid-30s white cisgender woman, you know, who's in a stable relationship, right? That it could be a variety of folks. And regardless of different people's identities and experiences, using our stories as a way that we can create that empathy, even where there are places where we might not understand the entirety of anyone else's particular situation. So I really appreciate everyone just grappling with me on these scenarios. I see some grins and nods, so hopefully folks found it rewarding. And I love what Anna just dropped in the chat about the intersectionality, that allows us to be open to all sorts of conversations. So thank you all. I'm the type of person, I love seeing stuff in the chat. So please feel free to continue putting stuff in the chat. I am a millennial who is used to many screens. So I'm going to start talking again about some other ways we can share our story, but I do hope you stay engaged with me in the chat. So does that sound good? Great. Okay, so now I am a comms professional, like I said, a communications professional, like I said. So I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't talk to folks like you about sharing your story more publicly, but it doesn't have to be scary. So we just practiced the one way to share your story, which are in these small group empathetic conversations, often with friends or other trusted individuals. Again, it wasn't trying to change anyone's mind. It was these empathy generating one-on-ones or conversations. Steph, sorry if I misused one-on-one. I know it means a very specific thing in your world. But for those of us who are able, and I recognize that it is not entirely possible for everyone, sometimes a way that we can help create a larger ripple effect is by sharing our stories even more publicly. And it really helps like Catholics for Choice, like you and me, on this journey to encounter, educate, and embolden more people of faith. So what's an actually really easy way to do that? Writing a letter to the editor, also known as an LTE. So I think it's a really easy way. What is a letter to the editor? Can I get, for anyone who's on screen, has anyone done, we're going to do a poll about this, but just to see some folks' hands, has anyone done a letter to the editor before, or is this a new? Oh, nice. So we've got a mixed bag in the in folks that have experience and don't. Oh, wow, this is exciting. Okay, so to quote my old boss again, Sister Simone, even the choir needs practice. So hopefully this will just be helpful practice as I'm preaching to the choir for all of us in letter to the editor writing. So what is a letter to the editor? It is a very short, usually about 150 to 250 words, response to a news article or a story. The article you're responding to should be recent, a few days old at the longest, and they can often be written using I statements or first-person narration. The place where you're most likely to submit a letter to the editor is in your local newspaper, but there are national outlets like the National Catholic Reporter that also ask for LTE submissions. To be clear, letters to the editor are something that newspapers want. So they don't usually keep it a big secret about how to submit one. That being said, nobody makes it easy in the sense that every paper has a slightly different process for how to submit their letter. It might be via a web form online on a website. It might be submitted via sending an email to an email address. Every paper is a little different. What you essentially want to do if you're trying to figure out to write a letter to the editor, if you read a really good article, you want to say, hey, I want to respond to this. Go to that website, look for the opinion section, or just search letters to the editor on the web page. And usually there's a pretty easy page that says, here's how to submit, here are our submission guidelines. So, but no matter what you do, you make sure that you do this as what's called an exclusive to the paper. So you don't really want to go submitting the same letter to the editor to America Magazine, the National Catholic Reporter, and Commonweal at the same time. You can still use your story and elements and submit to all three of those, but you don't want to do a word for word response to every single paper because they likely won't run it. And it really weakens credibility because papers like to be told that this is exclusive or just for them. So what are some of the elements that make a good letter to the editor? We talked about good stories or elements of storytelling. We're going to also now talk about letter elements for a LTE. Just remember RAFT. So R, respond to recent news. Address an article that was published in the past few days. Keep it focused on a single topic. A is ask for action. You can name a policymaker, you can name a bishop, or even pro-choice Catholics like me as your call to action. It depends on what the article is about. It's a powerful tool, I will say, specifically for elected officials who love reading their names in the local paper. And honestly, I suspect bishops are kind of similar. I actually have a friend, I'm just going to tell you this little story, who worked on Capitol Hill, and his first day on the job for a member of Congress, he was handed a Post-it note and he was told, anytime any of these people call, make sure you answer, or else you, and more importantly, our boss, will read about it in the paper a few days later. And you better believe he never missed any of those phone calls from those folks, because he knew that these people were letter to the editor writing people. So anyway, all that is letters to the editor work. It would definitely work for nudging your local bishop, or even just making fellow pro-choice people of faith and pro-choice Catholics aware to know that they're not alone. I don't know about you all, but I get all the time people saying, I had no idea you existed. I'm like, what a lovely place would it be to write a letter to the editor in your local paper so that people could say, wow, I had no idea. So back to RAFT, we have R, respond to recent news. A, ask for action. F is find the facts. Now, here's where I think facts are really helpful. They don't need to be in your story. You're not trying to convince anyone. But in response to a news piece, including a fact like 1 in 4 abortion patients is Catholic, or what is it? Kate will spot check me here. The Catholic Church didn't formally outlaw abortion until 1917.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
Ashley.
I was like, it's keeping me on my toes. You know, including facts like that will make people's ears perk up. It'll be interesting. And a news outlet that's supposed to present facts of the day, news of the day, would find that appealing. Don't forget to cite if you include a fact. And then T is tie it all together. Make sure you weave in your personal story or your faith values. Again, not every letter to the editor you write will get published, but if it does, make sure you amplify it. I beg of you, please send it to us at Catholics for Choice. We would love to know. Send it to your friends, send it to your local elected officials. You know, and we'd love, like I said, Catholics for Choice would really love to promote your letter to the editor with other pro-choice people of faith. It is really important to not just be a tree falling in the woods. So know that is something that's really important. So again, I know that we just did an informal poll, show of hands, but I want to ask folks now, perhaps more formally, Shannon will pop up a poll on everyone's screen. Have you written an LTE before? Options are yes, and I will do it again. No, but I'm willing to try. And no, I'm not interested. Sorry, there's no yes, and I'll never do it again. But if that's you, you can email me and we'll talk. Oh, do I see Anna with her hand up?
Yes, one of the things I would like to share just briefly, if you're contemplating it, one of the things that was helpful is to check with the local newspapers or wherever you're going to go and ask them what their qualifications are, i.e., most of the newspapers in the area, you have to make that LTE 350 words or less. You have to be willing to provide your name and your address and a phone number that they can reach you. They get a lot of whack jobs, and so they will call and say, Anna, I have this letter, is it yours? And they don't bother calling me anymore because I've written that many. The other thing is, if you can make a list, I don't want to call it a spreadsheet, but if you will write the name of your newspaper and the email address that it would go to, and any qualifications, most of the papers that I deal with, you can email it, but a couple of the papers say, do not send me a document. Put your letter in the body of this thing. So save yourself the time and the headache and know it. And then the other thing that helps us when I'm growling about abortion in our local newspaper, we have a trusted group of people. And I'm hoping, Ashley, that some of you comms people, a trusted group of people that I can say, before I send my snarky email saying 100% of all pregnancies are caused by men, somebody look at this and tell me if it's too snarky, because you want to, I don't ever want to use Catholics for Choice in a statement that would negatively reflect on the organization. So having somebody someplace that would be able to, you know, review it, take a look at it, something, but those kinds of things make it easier. And if you keep that list of your information, then when you get ready to write your next one, and I encourage you, write more than one, but we have a good group of people where I can send it to Helen And she goes, yeah, a little strong on that ending, but let's see what we can do about it. So that's helpful.
Yes. And Anna, I am definitely willing, and I know Steph and John on this call with CFC staff, we are definitely willing to be those temp checkers.
Okay.
If folks are interested, if they need help. The other thing that I will say is a letter to the editor's big sister of an op-ed. If you feel like you have a really compelling story and you want to write an op-ed, which is usually around 800 words, we're happy to work with you on that and offer you support. This is like a place where Catholics for Choice is growing, and it's really important. You know, I'm going to harp again on the National Catholic Reporter, America Magazine, all these Catholic outlets accept letters to the editor. And they're all right now, even Commonweal is doing, they're all doing things right now where they say, we have a series on what Catholics believe about abortion. And some of them are doing a really wonderful job. I would actually really encourage anyone who's interested. Molly Gordon just wrote an incredible piece in Commonweal that came out this week. That is definitely worth the read for a pro-choice Catholic perspective. But other outlets, they'll say, oh, you know, the only Catholic position, the only liberal Catholic position, or the only pro-choice Catholic position is, I would never have an abortion, but I don't think it should be illegal. We know that that's far from the actual representation of what Catholics believe about abortion. So know that I am definitely here to help. And thanks, John, for dropping that Commonweal piece in the chat, because if you haven't read it yet, you definitely should. It's really powerful, but read it after the training.
Yeah. Well,
Joanne, I see you with your hand up too. And I think we definitely have time for it.
I wanted to share an experience I had at a pro-choice rally in my local community. I got an old t-shirt and I wrote on the front of it, I'm a Catholic for choice. And I put that on this old t-shirt because I realized that people want to connect with someone who can either listen to them or they can ask questions. So I went to a rally with, I think there were a couple hundred women and some men. And wearing the t-shirt meant I would catch someone's eye, or they'd be curious. And I say that because if there are 200-300 people and it's a mixed crowd, then to be visible as a Catholic who understands the impact of sexism and male domination around reproduction, then women have stories to tell you. But first being visible, and then the second thing is just to being interested and letting people know, oh, you're Jewish, oh, you're Protestant, oh, you're whatever. Well, I'm glad to say there is a movement of people who are female and Catholic who are thinking about this issue also. And it's a chance for it's a personal connection. They can tell, I can ask a story, they can tell me their story. Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you. Wow, I'm finding this so life-giving. So thank you all for being here with me tonight. But just to put a pin or to sort of wrap the piece about letter to the editor writing again, I really want to let you know I am really happy to help. The whole Catholics for Choice team is really happy to help. Kate just dropped again that activists@catholicsforchoice.org email address. If you're ever interested, just reach out there and it will get to the right person. And we would absolutely be thrilled to help.
actually, are you talking about proofreading a letter immediately?
We could proofread. The other thing we could do is I'll just share with you all. I don't know how many folks tracked what happened in Kansas over the summer with their ballot initiative vote. we had someone who I knew from network actually reached out to me and said, I have 2 Catholic sisters who have written a letter about this, how they're voting, and we can't get a paper to publish it right now. Every paper is telling us that it's too long. And my eyeballs nearly popped out of my head because I was like, any newspaper worth their salt should take as many words as Catholic sisters want to give them on this issue, right? Like, what do you mean they're being told it's too long? But actually what we were able to do was we were able to work together. They had shortened it down to the 250 words, but I was also able to bring the story to Religion News Service, which is a national outlet. And it wound up not just getting placed in Kansas, but it also got placed in the Washington Post. And then actually Jamie Manson, Catholics for Choice's president, was on MSNBC and the readout with Joy Reid talking about this very thing, just because I got this phone call that said, we don't know what to do. Nobody will publish this thing that we have. So we are always happy to help, whether it be proofreading or if it's more of the, I think I have a powerful story to tell. This is a thing that is happening in my community. Help me figure out how to amplify it. So I hope that is sufficiently vague, Jack, for what we will help with.
No, just exactly where to send it. Do we send it by email? Do we send it by text message? And to exactly to you? To who?
You can email it to activists@catholicsforchoice.org.
Email, okay.
That's the best way, and then we'll forward it along. We can also follow up. I mean, I think folks on this call have like various folks' personal email addresses too. The only reason why I'm not saying mine out loud is because this is a recording that's going to live online. And unfortunately, there are antis out there who might flood my inbox. So, but I'm happy to message you privately if that's also helpful. Yeah, I'm not trying to be coy, basically, or secretive is why we direct people to that inbox. Does that all make sense? Okay, our time together has flown by. So I want to just wrap us up with a few follow-up actions. Hopefully I've gotten you sufficiently excited about storytelling. Seems like maybe I did. So I'm going to give myself a little pat on the back. Here are some things that I'd like to challenge folks to try. Whatever feels right to you. There, like I said, there's no one right answer. One is Catholics for Choice collects written stories and uses them in various communications. So you can share your written story with Catholics for Choice on our Share Your Story form, which John just lovely put in the chat. And what we do with those is you can choose how you want to be named, if you want your full name, if you want it anonymous, if you want first name, last initial, etc. And what we do is we use these stories for social media. That lovely brochure that Kate held up earlier that she read the prayer from, You Are Not Alone, features stories. So it's meant as a reflection guide for people who have had abortions. And it includes stories in that publication. We include stories in our magazine, Conscience. We might put it in letters that we mail to people when we invite them to learn more about Catholics for Choice, or honestly, to donate to Catholics for Choice. All of this is I want to be very clear, like you have a lot of control over what we can and can't do with your story. But if you're willing, putting it in that form, we won't use it without telling you, right? But like sharing that story with us helps us create community with you and also helps us spread the word to other folks who might like knowing about Catholics for Choice. Another thing you can try is to write a letter to the editor. Pick a paper, write 150 words about why you identify as a pro-choice Catholic or a pro-choice person of faith. I will say in a nonpartisan, ever thoughtful way, it's a great time to make that perspective heard right now as we have elections. And also what else is coming up is the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops meeting in November, where oftentimes issues of abortion, both in the context of elections and the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, people love to talk about abortion during those times. So saying, hey, I'm a pro-choice person of faith is really a compelling message in that moment. And then the final thing, because it wouldn't be a training with Steph Hansen Quintana if I didn't give this a plug, is have a one-on-one with a friend. So really, I think what we all sort of learned was in these small group conversations are really the best place where we can practice sharing our stories. So you can have a one-on-one with a friend. You can sign up for our festival of one-on-ones. So that is what I would challenge you all to do, to try one or all of these things. And with that, I am going to say thank you all so much for having me to talk with you tonight. Normally the comms person is the behind the camera person, not the front of the camera person. And I will close it back, or I will pass it back to Steph rather, to close us out for the evening and for the series. So thank you all again.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashley, so much for just your leadership and for just thoughtfully guiding us through this. That is such an important skill for our organizing and for our just witnessing of the goodness of each other. So thank you so much. And we are just wrapping up, folks. We're so grateful for you being here, for those of you who join us for 1, 2, for those of you that I know that I've seen you every single time. Thank you so much for being part of this community. You're going to get you're going to get 2 emails from us. One that is going to wrap up this last session together with the links and with everything that you need in order to take that follow-up action. And we are also planning to send you an email with all the links and with just a wrap-up email, so you have all the resources in one place. So keep an eye out for those.
Thank you.
Inhaling and just letting it out. And with gratitude, we pray. Creator God, we give you thanks for this people gathered here, for this community of faithful advocates and activists. Thank you for each person that's been here, that watched the recording, that have just accompanied us, for every person that has been willing and vulnerable, and for every person that just quietly accompanied this journey. We give you thanks for the people that offered their knowledge and their talents and their gifts to teach us, and for also all the teaching that happened in the silences and the in-between. We ask that you bless this group as they go forth to proclaim the good news of reproductive justice and rights. We pray all of these things in the name of Jesus, who taught us to set tables, but also to flip them. Amen. Bye, everyone. Have a great
Amen.
rest of your night. Take good care. Bye.